Houston, we have a problem. And that problem today is in the form of Bart Sibrel, who not only doesn't think we went to the moon, but believes we didn't go there in perhaps one of the most expensive ways possible. Hi, I'm Jenny, and welcome to Jen's Little Corner. Bart Sibrel is one of those even more odd forms of space deniers. While he denies that we've been to the moon, he doesn't deny space. He believes in space. He believes in satellites. He believes that we've gone into low Earth orbit. What he doesn't think is that we've been able to cross the Van Allen belts and get out beyond low Earth orbit. So we've never been to the moon. So the moon was faked. And he thinks this was done from low Earth orbit. So he spent all this money sending people into space, but we couldn't go any further. He's one of those deniers who denies because we haven't been back, ignoring the political imperative for the USA to get to the moon in the first place, to beat the Russians there, and the fact that that imperative waned in the 70s, so the importance of getting there was decreased, and then the risks to benefit ratio could no longer be balanced. He just says, no, we didn't go, we faked it, we can't go, we can't make it. And then of course follows the same sort of logic of all moon deniers, looking for weird things in photos and in conversations. We're going to take a little look at some of the things he's picked out, but just bear in mind that this man thinks that NASA spent billions of dollars sending men into space to orbit the Earth just to pretend they went to the moon. Yeah.
Not for public distribution. So my critics say, hey, this film that I'm about to show you is widely available. It's not. It never appeared anywhere until my film came out. And then the key parts that I'm about to show you and their, quickly released film to prove it's no big deal, they delete what I'm about to show you.
Now, of course, Mr. Sibrel is being just teensy bit disingenuous here. Whilst the original footage from this was not released to the public during the time of the Apollo missions, because it wasn't mission critical, it was just your average run-of-the-mill stuff whilst the ship's on its way to the moon, and news sites didn't have 24-hour feeds of what was happening at the time. They just had large newsreels of what was going on with the NASA missions. So this stuff wasn't general public distribution. NASA actually went through their footage, decided what would be interesting to the public, and that is what was released to the public. Hence, not for general distribution. Now, these video files were of course kept on record as records of missions, a bit like having a black box recorder in an aeroplane. So it wasn't kept away from the public because there was anything super secret on board them, although there may have been. There may have been mission critical stuff that was mentioned that wasn't meant to go out to the public. But in general, it was just not considered interesting enough. If you got the astronauts just announcing numbers and locations and distances all the time back to Houston, the public's going to get pretty bored of that, even for the first manned mission to the moon.
So, here is the most damning evidence right here.
Well, this should be interesting. The most damning evidence. Remember that.
Here's the beginning of the clip. And what you'll hear is a third track of audio of the CIA prompting the astronauts not to speak until 4 seconds have gone by.
Now, for a little bit of a heads up here, because unlike when I normally do these videos, I actually have sort of watched this already. He alleges that this is a CIA person, with no evidence whatsoever. And you'll also understand why that's important when you actually hear this so-called evidence of his.
Now, what this footage is, and I have an unedited reel of like an hour to an hour and a half of virtually the same shot over and over again. They're claiming that this is a little blue Earth, halfway to the moon looking back.
Which is exactly what it is. It's a picture of the moon shot out of the porthole of the Apollo 11 capsule, looking back towards the Earth from about halfway to the moon. Pretty simple, hey? See what he does with it.
And in fact, this is a circular window of the spacecraft, outside of which is the Earth and low Earth orbit. Now, originally I said it's kind of part of the Earth out the window, which it does look like, but another cinematographer pointed out is what they did is they took a transparent photograph, like a slide or an X-ray that was color. They put it over the circular window. So it's a circular window and, of course, the circular Earth. And they've backlit it with Earthshine. Now, this is still the window. You can see the little, 2 to 3 inch indentation here, like on a ship.
No, you can't. What you're actually pointing to there around the edge is the Earth's atmosphere. And the reason why the Earth looks like this shiny thing in the middle of all black is because light saturation. The Earth is a very, very bright object. So you don't need a lot of exposure on film to get a good picture of it. What you do need a lot of exposure on film to get a good picture of is the stars. So the Earth light washes out, so you cannot see the stars because you can't go to long exposures, not without just overexposing everything else. So you get this nice Earth on a very black background with this lovely, lovely little thing around the edge of it, which is the Earth's atmosphere. Not shining light on a portal window. And as for your expert cinematographer, actually, you said another expert cinematographer. Are you trying to say that you're an expert cinematographer? Not to disparage your credentials or anything, but I'd love to see your resume. I would hazard a guess your expert cinematographer isn't an expert cinematographer and is just somebody who likes to make the occasional YouTube film. Somebody with similar ideas to yourself, no doubt.
Because it's a pressurized bulletproof window, I presume. And first of all, if they're halfway to the moon, there would be a radio delay. So it would take 2 seconds for the radio signal to go out, 2 seconds for them to come back.
You couldn't be more wrong here. It takes 1.25 seconds for a signal to get from Earth to the moon. And if you're halfway in between, then the round time of that entire signal's going to be a total of 1.25 seconds. Isn't math wonderful? So your whole idea of the signal taking 4 seconds to get from Houston to Apollo 11 to back again is completely wrong. Disingenuous or stupid? Because a short Google search would have shown you that you are wrong. Now, as to your cinematographer friend, I gotta wonder, is he really a cinematographer? Or is he just somebody who creates the occasional YouTube video? Maybe a conspiratorial YouTube video creator like yourself? And he thinks this might be the case, because I'm pretty sure that if you ask any actual cinematographer whether they faked the footage of going to the moon, they're gonna say, those things aren't fake.
They're actually in Earth orbit. This is, you'll see clear proof in a second here why they're still in Earth orbit, or proof that they are. They can't leave Earth orbit for a number of reasons. They don't have enough fuel, they don't have radiation protection, and so forth.
So you just assert 2 reasons why they can't get to the moon. No evidence to back them up. First of all, you say there wasn't enough fuel. Well, not a lot of fuel is actually needed to get to the moon once you're already in space. And you've already admitted they got into space. To get to the moon, you just need enough fuel to give yourself a push And then because there's no friction, you just coast there. And then you just need enough fuel at the other side to turn around and insert yourself into orbit. And then when you want to come back, you just fire those rockets again, pull yourself out of orbit, and head back to Earth, insert yourself into an Earth orbit, and then eventually deorbit and land in the ocean somewhere with parachutes, which is how they did Apollo. Not a lot of extra fuel actually required for that. Some, but not a heap. In fact, the Apollo missions actually cut the fuel fairly much to the bone. They took a lot of risks there that they probably shouldn't have. But they were able to do it quite successfully. And even in their emergency mission, Apollo 13, they still managed to get around the lack of fuel problem to the fuel tank exploding and get the crew safely back to Earth. Now, as for your other assertion about the radiation, I assume you're talking about the Van Allen belts here. Now, the wonderful thing about the Van Allen belts is, whilst there are areas of them that are quite strong in radiation, and this is particles picked up from the sun, caught in the Earth's magnetic field, and then accelerated, it's not consistent. There are parts of it that have more radiation than others. And scientists have been able to map these areas for a long time. So when the Apollo astronauts went through the Van Allen belts, they went through the areas that were the least troublesome. This minimized their radiation exposure down to what you might get over a few years on Earth to within the couple of hours it took to fly through them. A minor extra risk for cancer over the life of the astronauts. In fact, they were more at risk in space if there had been a solar flare or, say, a gamma ray burst within a distance that was far enough away not to really hurt anybody on Earth, but to irradiate somebody in a spaceship. The damage from the Van Allen belts was minimal. These other radiation things were considered an acceptable risk. They are not considered an acceptable risk anymore, which is part of the reason we haven't gone back to the moon. Risk-taking stuff that we did in the early 70s and late 60s is not acceptable now. We have better, safer practices. So the ships of the future, for example, SpaceX's Starship, actually will have better shielding to protect the crew, and have areas in the ship where they can go to which offer even better protection in case there's something like a solar flare. We knew about the dangers of the Van Allen belts, and we could mitigate them to a point that was acceptable at the time when the missions were done. Perhaps not mitigate them to a point that would be acceptable now, but for the time, yes, acceptable.
And by them faking being halfway to the moon proves they didn't go to the moon. Otherwise, they wouldn't be faking it, right?
But as I just showed you, they didn't fake it. You haven't given any evidence that they actually did fake it. What? You misunderstand a picture from a portal in a spaceship and you got the time wrong for how long signals take between Earth and halfway to the moon, and that's your evidence. I'm sorry, you're going to have to do a lot better than that.
And it also proves that the limit is Earth orbit, because they can't even leave Earth orbit.
But you haven't even shown that to be true. And now we have satellites from countries that weren't America that are orbiting the moon. They've taken pictures of the landing sites on the moon that Apollo astronauts went to. I don't see where your room for denial is here. It's like, if you can accept that we went to space, why can't you accept that we went to the moon?
What a surprise. 50 years later, they still cannot leave Earth orbit.
I like that. We can't leave Earth orbit. Technically, we could. We can build rockets that are just as powerful as the Saturn V. SpaceX aren't very far away from doing that. And it's not for a want of technology. We have the technology to do this. We have exactly the same technology we had then. What we don't have is the political will, because there is no space race going on. And no political imperative to get there. What we also have is a duty of care to our astronauts. So we don't want to send in any way is a risk. We want to have systems in place to get people back if there are issues. We want to know that we've got good support structures there for them if we send them to the moon or further.
Isn't that interesting, right? You know, if Toyota said they built a car that could go 50,000 miles on a gallon of gasoline, and yet 5 decades later their best car can only go 50 miles, you would say the previous claim was a forgery. It's so obvious. And yet people don't see that.
So here we go with a false analogy. We can build rocket engines that are every bit as powerful as those on the Saturn V. In fact, the shuttle's main engines were more powerful than the Saturn V engines. But the shuttle wasn't designed to go to the moon. It was designed to do maneuvers in orbit, to put up satellites, and ultimately build the space station, which was meant to be part of the plans for the future of Earth space travel. So we can do what we did then. We haven't done it because we went in a different path with what we developed. We want to be safer for our astronauts. How many times do I have to say this?
Because of their emotional attachment and their pride, which blinds them from seeing the truth, which you're about to see, hopefully with an open mind.
I love to hear these conspiracy theorists talk about having an open mind. There is nothing open about their minds at all. They are just so closed off in their ideas. To deny science like they do, to deny reality like they do, just is absolutely amazing.
So what we have here, I'm about to play, NASA's going to talk, and then there's going to be exactly a 4-second delay. Remember, a pretend 2 seconds out, halfway to the moon, a pretend 2 seconds back. Then you're going to hear the CIA whisper in Neil Armstrong's private channel earpiece, which on this unedited version we hear. Then you're going to hear crystal clear, no radio EQ like, you know, the astronauts in orbit or NASA with a little muffled walkie-talkie type sound. No, this person is where the tape's being recorded. It's crystal clear. He's prompting them to say talk. Now in spacecraft films, when they release this segment, they delete out talk. Isn't that interesting?
Again, with the wrong time delay between the Earth and this ship, and an assertion of an unknown CIA agent. And it's clear in his ear. Remember that.
Why would they delete out evidence of the fraud unless it proved the fraud? If they left it in there, it would prove the fraud, and the fact that they edited it out also proves the fraud, because it proves they're trying to cover up. Let's just take a look and a listen.
Now he's built this up to be his master stroke, so it better be bloody good after all this waffle that we've had before. But somehow, I don't think it's going to be.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger.
Okay, so according to NASA, there is nobody on this channel except Houston Control and the astronauts, right?
Right, exactly. There is nobody on this radio communication apart from Houston and Buzz Aldrin. So, Houston sends forward a message. Hello, Apollo 11, Houston. Gladstone says the TV looks great. Over. And then a few seconds later, you hear this faint noise from someone in the command module. And then Aldrin going, Roger, we're zooming in on Earth now. Pretty simple, straightforward stuff. 2 people, plus a little noise in the background. I don't see any real problem here.
This is an open, non-military, real flight to the moon, allegedly, right? But who's this third party prompting them, to speak? Let's take a listen again.
Okay, Roger.
Let's go back just a hair farther so you can hear NASA first.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger.
You see that? They were waiting 4 seconds, then said talk. See, if he answered right away, it would give away the fact that he's really close to the Earth.
Except that the delay from Earth to the Apollo 11 spaceship and then back to Earth is only 1.25 seconds. So his delay more indicates that there was something else going on in the cockpit, and it took a while for him to respond. And some of the noise from the cockpit is what came back through to mission control. Now, you don't go on to play the message any further than this in your video, and there'll be a link to the video down below so people can check if I'm telling the truth here or not. But I will, because if you listen to the rest of the conversation, I think it'll shed just a little bit more light on this and explain why you're being so disingenuous.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger. We're mapping in on Earth. Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, did you copy? Over. Roger, we copied that, Charlie. Roger, your transmissions the last couple of times have been about 2 by. Over. Okay, how do you read me now? Right, you're 5 by now.
So when you listen to the full footage, you can tell that Houston are actually having a problem hearing the crew aboard the command module. They are having radio difficulties between the ship and Earth, and that's showing up as static and stuttered speech, which means the crew on board the command module also were having difficulty hearing what was coming from Earth, hence the longer delay in responding. So I find it very disingenuous of you to suggest that that sound that happens before Buzz Aldrin responds is somebody saying talk, when it's quite obviously a mixture of command module noise and this stuttering effect from a bad radio signal between Houston and Apollo 11. You've been completely disingenuous in this video. Even the footage that I found, which included the rest of the conversation, is actually slightly better quality than the footage that you showed. So some of the artifacts that you were talking about don't even exist in the original footage. And it only took me 5 seconds to find this bit of footage on NASA's website. So even if you did grab this tiny piece of footage from somebody else, although you do actually say that you're the one who found it, it wouldn't have taken you very long to find the rest of the footage and put the whole lot together and come out with the real answer. But you're not interested in the real answer. You'd rather force your false narrative of NASA sending people into space, costing billions of dollars, orbiting the Earth, and pretending they're going to the moon. Why? Why would you do this? Why would any country do this? This makes no sense. This makes even less sense than people who say we don't even go to space. You, sir, are completely disingenuous. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And remember, when you're having that little bit of fun, try not to choke on the selfie stick.